All right, good morning. Before we get started today, I'd like to include writing someone wrote into us. They're saying, Pastor Reed, the abortion issue, national ban or left up to the states? I say the former. Maybe you can comment on this in your newsletter or while doing a sermon. So that's what I'm going to do. The abortion issue, obviously, it can be proven in a matter of moments if it's illegal biblically, which it is. If you don't believe me, you can check Exodus 20, verse 21 through 25, I believe. Whether it's a national ban or state ban, I would rather it be banned nationally. Then we would be online biblically with at least one law in the books, right? But if you live in a state that it's hasn't been decided or has been abolished or it's legal or illegal, you don't practice that anyway in spite of what the state is. Okay, we know that following the state is secular, so statism, but it would be like anything else. If you live in a state and they legalized abortion, you're not under the gun to do that. I'd prefer that they didn't, but the same would be like, legalizing, remember we used to have dry counties back in the day? Well, now that they sell alcohol, you're not obligated to drink it. So, just because your state allows something doesn't mean you have to or you agree with that. Marijuana would be another one. You can live in Colorado and not smoke it, right? Or Washington or whatever. So yes, the abortion issue, obviously it's illegal biblically, and it's very easy to find that out. Nationally, I would prefer a ban. States, I don't know where Idaho is on that. Yeah, they're working on outright banning it. So, that's good. That's a good thing. It is good. Nationally, I'd love to see that. People, what is it they say? Men who make the laws can't comment on abortion. They can't make laws regulating abortion because women are the ones that give birth, and since men haven't experienced childbirth, they can't make laws concerning it. Well, if that's the case, we can't make laws on murder either because I haven't experienced murdering someone. So you can't use experience as a basis for making laws. So just toss that one out. And then people are like, well, what about if the doctor has to choose between the mother's life or the unborn infants? That never happens. Ask a doctor, he's never had to make that decision. So there's that. Yeah.
It's interesting that on the books, actually, if you kill a woman who's carrying a baby and you kill them both, you are responsible for both.
Right, yeah, because there was that car wreck. I can't recall that it was 1970s. There was that car wreck, which is retribution. If you read the Bible one where the two guys are fighting and they bump the woman and she gives birth and it kills the man dies. If it's a premature birth, you pay a fine. So there is retribution for that. Now that's for unintentional. How much more for intentional infanticide? Right? That's how you have to go with that. Same with the mother hen and her eggs. Birth, young, and children have a high premium in the Bible. Okay, so we don't mess with that. You take life on God's terms, and you read about those terms in His law. That's how that is. So yes, capital punishment is allowed in the Bible under the terms God does set out for us. Abortion, no. That's what I'm saying. So a national ban on it would be wonderful because then at least we're in line with one from the book of Exodus. So yeah. But if your state allows it or you don't allow it, that's something that's out of your realm of control anyway. I said if it's something allowed in your state that you don't agree with or is not biblical, you don't have to go along with it. And you don't have to like it. On a lighter note, I had some buddies from Nebraska come down last year. We played some disc golf, and one of them lost a disc. Well, his phone number's on the disc. A guy in Sandpoint called the number, said, hey, I found your disc. My buddy in Nebraska said, hey, man, a guy in Sandpoint found the disc I lost last year and asked, he called the number and said, hey, I know this belongs to you. I'd like to return it. Then my buddy said, well, I've got a guy that lives there. And he told me, okay, well, they said it was underneath a trash can on the disc golf course. So this morning I went out before church in a suit, and I'm out on the disc golf course. It's not even 9 o'clock yet, and I'm lifting up trash cans to see which one has the disc under it. Right. So I'm sure I look like a government agent looking for a dead drop, CIA, looking for something that somebody left, some crypto or something. But just to show you, honesty is still here. That's good. And everybody here is agreeing that's good, honest. And the guy could have found out the guy was in Omaha, Nebraska, and be like, oh, well, I'll keep it. He's not coming after me. But no, he went through, and my buddy sent me the message, and he's like, hey, would you mind going and grabbing that? And so, yeah, this morning I was picking up trash cans on the disc golf course before church. Trying to remember what. Yep, I found it. So he said the trash can with the red lid was about 4 of them. And I'm like, if these are the ones on the back of the course, I'm going to be here all morning. And I'm out in this suit doing that. But yeah, just honesty's still here. That's nice. It's good. So at least in Sandpoint, we have honest disc golfers. So if you guys play disc golf, come here and play with me. I'll probably beat you. And if you lose your disc, you have a chance. It'll be found, and I'll go pick it up under a trash can for you. All right, now, for Sunday morning, we've been discussing Ezekiel 36 and other prophecies concerning God's people and his future plans for them. We saw this verse last week. Oh, and happy Mother's Day, by the way. Okay. We saw this verse last week. Ezekiel 36:32. For not for your sakes do I do this, saith the Lord God. Be it known unto you, be ashamed and confounded for your own ways, O house of Israel. So we know that God intends to do something with Israel for his own name's sake. For his own name's sake. And that would be house of Israel. We understand in Ezekiel 36, it's the house of Israel being addressed. So, and the reason and the how of God's plan is the focus of this morning's sermon. So we hear a great deal about evil and what evil men are doing in this age. Yet this morning I'd like to call your attention to what God is doing and what he'll continue to do. That's what we focus on here. And like I said, there is evil in the world, but even with just the humble finding of a disc golf disc, there is still honesty in this land. Still good things happening. So let's go to Jeremiah 31:31. I'm sure you all know this. Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. Who? Israel and Judah. Very important. Now here's the reason for the prophecies we've been reading in Ezekiel. This is what's behind all of that. Notice, behold, anytime you see that in the Bible, that means it's going to be something very special, something very important. Okay? And before we go further, I will take some time to remind you, and this is because we do have a newer audience, which is a good thing more and more, that the situation, what the situation is here in Scripture. So most of Judah went into the, most of Judah went into the Assyrian captivity with 10-tribed Israel. Okay, that's a very important fact in Bible history. It's often overlooked. We must think as Israel and Judah as being united to a certain extent throughout Bible history. And then, of course, they were separated at a particular time. And this is often overlooked, but here it is. In 2 Kings, and the king of Assyria did carry away Israel unto Assyria, and put them in Hala and in Habor by the river of Gozan, and in the city of the Medes. Okay, so we know this verse is telling us that the 10-tribed Israel was indeed carried off into the Assyrian captivity, very definitely. Now look at 18:13. Now, in the 14th year of King Hezekiah, did Sennacherib, king of Assyria, come up against all the fenced cities of Judah and took them. This is very important to us because very confusing doctrines tend to arise from people who try to keep these two houses separate, so separate to the extent that they actually, in some doctrines, become two sets of people, different people entirely. You'll see sometimes that they'll even go so far as to make Judah a different race of, or different peoples than Israel. If you recall, the house of Judah is the Jews, right? And that's British Israelism. When you separate these two houses without these verses in mind, very confusing doctrines come out. Very confusing. And it goes all over the place. Now, the inhabitants of Jerusalem, we know. The inhabitants of Jerusalem were indeed carried off by Babylon. Those Judites were carried off by Babylon about 100 years later. Can we know about that? But people want to say, well, Israel went to 10 house 10 tribed Israel went north with Assyria, and then all of Judah and a little bit of Benjamin got carried off by Babylon. No, most of Israel and Judah were gone by that time. It was only the remnant in Jerusalem that Babylon came and got. All right? And the new covenant, that's why the new covenant, as stated in Jeremiah, includes both houses. You see that. So in other words, all of Jacob's children is what Jeremiah 31:31 is about. So let's look at Jeremiah 31:32. The covenant, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day that I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, which my covenant they break, although I was an husband unto them, saith the Lord. So the new covenant we see would be something different, meaning that the conditions of the new covenant are different from the conditions of the old. And there are many, many covenants or testaments in the old scriptures, more than a dozen really. But only one covenant of the many is actually spoken of as the old covenant. And this is very important. That old covenant was the only one replaced by the new one. Talking about covenants. For instance, the covenant of salvation, which we read about early on in the Bible. The covenant of salvation through the blood atonement was never set aside or replaced because of this new covenant. Okay, we know this. That covenant, neither were the covenants that God made with Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, David, Noah. You see, those weren't replaced by this new covenant. And the reason why that's is important is Christ came to confirm the covenants, not abolish them. Okay, Paul tells us that. So the old covenant is being replaced by the new covenant. And I'll explain that more as we go along because it does some serious damage to the Bible if you start replacing everything. So the old covenants, now, like I said, what about personal salvation? Okay, that was provided by the death and resurrection of Christ. That's that one. It actually goes all the way back to Adam and Eve, and that is not the old covenant here. That's not the old covenant being spoken of. The old covenant was made at the time when the Israel people came out of Egypt. That's what we're talking about. The reason I stress this is because nowadays the entire Old Testament is thought of as the old covenant. And as such, people use the new covenant to replace 2/3 of the Bible. You see, that's where it gets messed up. They do away with or replace the entire Old Testament because they say the new covenant replaces that. It's New Testament Christians. It's a serious error. And we know nothing could be further from the truth. Because if you toss out the Old Testament, you've tossed it all out. All of it. And what's sad is it's actually being taught in modern churches that the Old Testament has been replaced by the new. And that destroys the foundation of Christian faith and actually the proof of the divine inspiration of Scripture. Okay? Let's look at Exodus 19:3. And Moses went up to God, and the Lord called unto him out of the mountain, saying, Thus shalt thou say unto the house of Jacob, and tell the children of Israel. All right, who? Whatever follows, whatever Moses is going to say unto them, has something to do with the house of Jacob and the children of Israel. It is not a covenant made with all the peoples of the earth. You see, it's specific and exclusive. That's something that's very difficult to get through the minds of modern Christians. Ye have seen what I did unto the Egyptians, and how I bare you on eagle's wings, and brought you unto myself. Now therefore, if you will obey my voice indeed, and keep my covenant, then shall you be a peculiar treasure unto me above all people, for all the earth is mine. Okay, so these are the terms of the old covenant, and notice that there is an if clause in there. There's if, which is not found in the new covenant made with Israel and Judah. All right? Also, the old and new covenant is made with the exact same people otherwise. Okay, we know that. The exact same people. If you bring in somebody else into this contract or this covenant, that's a breach of contract. A third party cannot enter into this. This is an agreement between who? God and Israel. Okay, and I'm saying national Israel. This is before the division of the kingdoms. God and Israel, those people, physical seed of Abraham, correct? All right. So, if God brings in another peoples, he's violated commandment 7. He's adulterated a contract. You see what he's done? So it has to stay this way. The contract, the terms of the old and new covenant change with this if. The parties do not change. Where do we get this spiritual Israel idea? Right? Now, so everyone agrees that it's only with the house of Israel that this is made with, specifically. So we cannot allow a third party into this contract ever. Otherwise it nullifies it, correct? Is that correct? Does that sound? Okay. Now, if you separate God and Christ then, meaning they're two individuals entirely, that makes Christ an illegal third party into this covenant. You see? Doing away with God's oneness and bringing a separate God into this contract breaks it the same way as if we brought another people in. You've changed the parties once again. Doing away with God's oneness only makes sense if you're ignorant of Bible law, specifically biblical principles on contract law. Okay, so let's just get that straight. For those that want to argue against God's oneness, you bring Christ into this contract, that's a third party. You bring the Jewish people into this contract, that's a third party. They're illegal. God the one, Israel the people, two parties. That's it. That's it. If you want to know about contract law, I have Bouvier's Law Dictionary. We'll look up contract. We'll see what that has to say. Contract, a deliberate engagement between two competent parties upon a legal consideration to do or to abstain from doing some act. Is that right? Exactly right. A mutual promise upon lawful consideration or cause which binds the parties to a performance. Is that correct? Exactly right. He quotes the 1828 dictionary, which I happen to have up here. He quotes Webster, so I'll just read it straight from him. Webster says of a contract, an agreement or covenant between two or more persons, which each party binds himself to do or forbear some act, and each acquires a right for what the other promises. A mutual promise upon lawful consideration or cause, which binds the parties to a performance. Is that correct? And you see here, he says, and each acquires a right to what the other promises. Okay, that should be Bible-wide if you understand. Israel has a right to the terms God has had us agree to. And you understand that would eventually become our inheritance. We have a claim to this contract as those people to this day. It did not go away. That is very simply what is wrong when people teach this the other way around. You see, when you break the contract or the language or any of the clauses or you move the parties around, it's a breach. It nullifies it. And God obviously is not going to break his own law to make room for a third party, either another God or another people. It goes both ways. So if you want to have that discussion, let me know and email me, and I'll tell you all about Bible contract law and why separating God and Christ is unlawful. Unlawful. It's all right to do that if you want to throw out the new covenant. Now, Exodus 19:6, and ye shall be unto me a kingdom of priests and an holy nation. These are the words which thou shalt speak unto the children of Israel. We know these things. We know all these verses. So notice here, God is saying that the Israel people would serve other peoples and nations in a matter similar to the responsibility and calling which a clergyman has to his flock. Okay, and we know this. That word holy, of course, we know simply means chosen, set apart, or selected by God for a special purpose. Okay? Now, it does not mean sinless. Okay, it doesn't mean that. God said he spoke through his holy prophets, and we say all the prophets were sinless. No, they were not. Holy is set apart for a godly purpose. Okay, so that's what we have. And our manners and responsibilities are similar to priests. All right? Also, these words are for who again? Children of Israel. All right. This was about 600 years before there were any people on earth spoken as as the Jewish people. Okay, so they're out. And I know this is elementary to long-time kingdom believers, but without knowledge and insight on the old covenant, you cannot possibly appreciate or understand the significance of the new covenant. Okay? Exodus 19:7, and Moses came and called for the elders of the people and laid before their faces all these words which the Lord commanded him. All right. So you know what happens next? And all the people answered together and said, all that the Lord has spoken, we will do. We do solemnly swear to uphold the law of God. Right? Isn't that what we told him? These terms that Moses laid before us, the terms of the old covenant, they apparently agreed to, and they said, we will do what the Lord has said, and Moses returned the words unto the people unto the Lord. Now remember, this is a contract, a covenant, a testament. God did not need a lawyer to draw these papers up. Why? Who did he swear to? Himself, because there was no one greater. So there's not a lawyer. This is God and the people. Moses is just the communique, okay? He's just a liaison right now. So this verse, if you want to get technical, this ratifies the covenant, okay? And its conditions. And we see here it was accepted by the people. By the people. All right. And the Lord said unto Moses, lo, I come unto thee in a thick cloud, that the people may hear when I speak with thee, and believe thee forever. And Moses told the words of the people unto the Lord. So this verse, along with the rest of chapter 19 of Exodus, you can read, is the adoption and establishment of the old covenant. Okay, so that's what that's all about. And you understand this is also a marriage. And you understand the marriage vow is a contract, right? Okay. With this verse in mind, with these in mind, let's go back to the new covenant now. We read this one before. So we'll go to verse 32. Not according to the covenant which I made with their fathers in the day that I took them by the hand and bring them out of the land of Egypt. There's that repetition again. Which my covenant they break, although I was an husband unto them, saith the Lord. So this is why the new covenant had to be instituted to replace the old covenant. God says that although he favored, protected, blessed, and provided for the Israel people, from their beginning, they broke his covenant. All right? But this shall be the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, saith the Lord. I will put my law in their inward parts and write it in their hearts, and will be their God, and they shall be my people. Knowing our identity would be very handy here, wouldn't it? Now, after those days, there's two ways of thinking about that. So, some people have said that the new covenant is in effect after those days, and after those days means after the Israel people have served their 7 times punishment, okay? And that's when the new covenant starts, and that's when the new covenant would be instituted. Others have said that the new covenant is not effective until after the death and resurrection of Christ. Okay, and if we discussed this earlier in church, Christ said he would eat and drink with his disciples in the kingdom. He died and was resurrected. What did he do with his disciples? Ate and drank with them. So this is kingdom now, so that means the new covenant is effective. It's now. Either way, we know, regardless of when it started, that's debated. Regardless of when it started, we know that it's active now in this age. And keep in mind that God brings in the kingdom and the covenants over periods of time. The kingdom passes without observation. I will put my law in their inward parts and write it in their hearts. Now, that is the reason this nation was founded, right? The Puritans and the Pilgrims came here from the old world, and what they wanted to establish was a civil government based on the law of God and be in harmony with it. That's evidence that in this age, the new covenant is indeed active. Often this phrase, law in their inward parts and law in their hearts, that's usually, if you bring this up with New Testament Christians, it's usually spiritualized, and they limit these words to personal salvation, right? Which is man's mind. I will know what to do. No, it's not that. Salvation was brought forth by the death and resurrection of Christ. Okay, that's the blood atonement. No one has ever been saved by the law. It's impossible. We know that. In the Old Covenant, God wrote his laws, statutes, and judgments on what? Tables of stone. The New Covenant, he says he would write them in the hearts and minds of his people. Right? And the next verse is about what will happen when this comes into full fruition. So notice, from one verse to the next, we're going to jump. A big jump. And they shall teach no more every man his neighbor, and every man his brother, saying, Know the Lord, for they all shall know me, from the least of them to the greatest of them, saith the Lord, for I will forgive their iniquity, and I will remember their sin no more. This must be the full fruition of the perfected kingdom age. You see how we jumped? So we understand that this will be when the kingdom is in full operation and full manifestation. Everyone will know the Lord. That is the gospel of the kingdom. That's our hope right there in the old scriptures. And notice that this will not be due to the efforts of man. Who's doing this? God Almighty will bring this to pass in his own timing. Okay? He said he's made a covenant and that he will remember our sins no more and he will forgive our iniquities. That's what he said. That's the contract. You see, without the new covenant and without Christ's blood atonement for the kingdom, there would never be a kingdom on earth without this covenant. Personal salvation, of course, is for everyone who will, everywhere. All right? But the kingdom redemption is for the kingdom people, the people we're reading about in Exodus. Through this kingdom redemption, God says he will bring the kingdom on earth. That's how that works. You cannot keep these two things. If you try to separate the Old and New Testament, you're going to run into trouble. One of the troubles is that people will say, well, this is personal salvation. As soon as everyone's saved, Jesus will come back. That's not how that works. Also, salvation and redemption are two very different things. It's only the kingdom redemption that's promised to the house of Israel and the house of Judah. That's the terms of the contract. Because apparently he's talking about the kingdom when we see the same kingdom language repeated throughout the entire Bible. So, to limit the new covenant to personal salvation is not only unscriptural, but it ignores and rejects much of the work Christ did on the cross and what he purchased and provided for us when he was crucified. You see, does away with a whole lot of things. Now, he confirmed the covenant of salvation. Also, he sealed and established the covenants made with Abraham, David, and others. That was Christ's work. This is what we observe and recognize whenever we partake in the Lord's Supper or communion, which is a feast, right? We understand the work Christ did, which would be salvation and the redemption of his children. Two different terms. So this morning we'll wrap up in Hebrews. Turn to Hebrews 8. Read verse 6 here. But now hath he obtained a more excellent ministry, by how much also he is the mediator of a better covenant, which was established upon better promises. So you see here the writer of Hebrews obviously understands the terms and conditions of the old versus the new covenants. You see, Christ was the catalyst for this, moving this along, which is fine because Christ is God, God is Christ. No third parties. So he can move his covenant along as he did. Hebrews 7 and 8. For if the first covenant had been faultless, then no place should have been sought for the second. For finding fault with them, who? Israel, he saith, Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. Physical Israel, physical Judah. There's no spiritual Israel and no spiritual Judah here, is there? That's not in there. You're not going to find it in the Bible. Now when it comes to the terms and conditions of this covenant. So, what we're reading of in the Old Testament foretold of Christ the Messiah who would break the power of sin and death, right? That's salvation. You can read about that in Adam and Eve, right? That's the foretelling of the Messiah. And he would, in that act, breaking sin and death, bring salvation to the individual. That's a function of Christ on the cross. We're talking about the new covenant and the change of terms. Now the responsibility is placed upon God instead of the Israel people who we know failed. So it's not an if-then situation in the new covenant. God says, you will obey my law, and you will be my people. You will, not if. And I'll read these verses here. Hebrews 8, 9 through 13. Not according to the covenant that I made with the fathers in the day when I took them by the hand and led them out of the land of Egypt, because they continued not in my covenant, and I regarded them not, saith the Lord. For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, saith the Lord. I will put my laws into their mind and write them in their hearts, and I will be to them a God, and they shall be to me a people. And they shall not teach every man his neighbor and every man his brother, saying, Know the Lord, for all shall know me from the least to the greatest. For I will be merciful to their unrighteousness, and their sins and iniquities will I remember no more. In that he saith, A new covenant he has made the first old. Now that which decayeth and waxeth old is ready to vanish away. Notice it's ready to vanish away. It has not vanished away. So some of the old covenant is still here, which is obeying the law or die, right? Still here. People want to say that the new covenant replaces all those old Jewish laws. It does not do that. You don't even find that in the New Testament. Where they get it? Well, I know where they get it. It's because let's talk about the abortion, right? Okay, so why do you want abortion in the land? Why do you want lawlessness in the land? Well, abortion, to preserve beauty, to continue, you hear these things, right? Reasons for it. Preserve beauty, to have freedom, and continue to be irresponsible. And of course, abstinence is out the window, because when you just hit reset, what do you need abstinence for, right? When we're talking about abortion. Well, when you have lawlessness, people say, well, I need to put that old covenant away so that I don't have responsibilities, duties, or I don't have to have accountability for my actions. Okay, so we run into this all the time. Without the law, you have lawlessness, right? Okay. So people will use this new covenant and they will replace all of the Old Testament with it. It's a grave error in the churches today. Churches preach this. I've seen whole churches put the law away at once, and they've still got the Ten Commandments hanging up and I'm like, well, that's just taking up wall space, if you're going to have those up. Because I ask them, well, what do we do about these? I'm like, well, we follow those. I'm like, that's great, but what do you do with the lawbreakers? There's never an answer. Never an answer, And then I'm a troublemaker, and I get kicked out and not asked to speak again. But I know. But that's right, I take the heat for you guys. Now, and you'll notice what we just read here, these passages are almost word for word what we read from Jeremiah. So the Old and New Covenants are clearly identified in the New Testament. You don't have an excuse. You don't. And as a matter of fact, if you have a good Bible, it'll point you right back to Jeremiah 31. In Ezekiel, we read about the terms of the Old and New Covenants in there as well. They're all over the Bible, because Christ understands that the Bible's written so the child can understand it, right? And most teachers will tell you, how do you teach children? Repetition. Repetition. Okay. So, we see the new covenant will not be fully realized until the full manifestation of the perfected kingdom age. So it is on its way. We know these things. God is writing those laws in the hearts and mind of his people in this nation right now. He's still doing that. And he will continue to do so until we learn that his laws must be obeyed nationally. That's the kingdom message for the nation. And like I said, I don't know the young man that found the disc golf disc, but apparently he knew not to steal because he was honest about it. Right? God is still writing his laws upon our hearts and minds in this age, and he'll continue to do so. Passes without observation, but here we can observe little acts of kindness that, of course, are in line biblically with what God said. Hebrews 8:12. For I will be merciful to their unrighteousness, and their sins and iniquities will I remember no more. That's kingdom language. We're all aware of the unrighteousness in our nation today, but Christ said that he died for the redemption and cleansing of the kingdom. And we know and believe that. That's kingdom age language. That's our great hope. And as we continue in this study, we'll get more and more into what our hope for this nation is and the function of the Zion nation of Bible prophecy in this age. That's all we have for today.